In our last few lessons, we learnt about the meaning of migration. Well, migration is the movement of people from one place to another in order to settle in the new location either permanently or for a temporary period of time. So from this we understand that migration can be both long-term as well as short-term. We further learn that migration can be voluntarily done or it can be done forcefully, that is involuntary migration. We further learnt about the types of migration, in which we understood that migration can be characterized as international or national migration, right? In this lesson, we will be completing the understanding of migration by looking at the positive as well as negative impact of migration from both the sending country's side as well as the receiving country's side, right? So we need to understand that migration can be beneficial or non-beneficial for both the country from where the people are migrating or for the country to where the people are migrating. So just to cite a general example, we have a very important point here. So the first point here says that migration leads to the creation of new cities and satellite towns. Now you may ask, what is a satellite town? Well, satellite towns are new cities that are adjacent to the main huge or major city. So these are smaller municipalities that are separate from the main land area of the major city, and they have their own administration. So these cities are mainly a result of migration. So when the population density or the population in general increases in a particular city, they tend to create satellite towns or new cities right adjacent to the main cities, so that resources are not limited for the people living in an area and people can peacefully live in a separate area with enough resources, right? So to cite a very good example, in India itself, we have Navi Mumbai right here in Maharashtra as the satellite city of Mumbai. So Mumbai is the main city, of which Navi Mumbai is the satellite city. So let us continue our discussion on migration and understand that how can migration be both beneficial as well as non-beneficial for both sending as well as receiving countries. So starting with the first example. So take for instance, in a classroom there are a certain number of children, say 20, right? Now there are enough benches in the classroom so that each bench has 2 children. So 2 children can sit on each bench, and the benches are enough for the number of children in the class or the number of students. Now in the middle of the year there are new admissions and some new students join the school through the midterm admission. Now you see that the number of students have increased in the same classroom. So the area remains the same. The resources, that are benches, tables, books, all remains the same, while only the number of children suddenly increases in the middle of the year. So take for instance, in a class there are 10 students, right? And this is the area of the classroom. And there are enough benches, and each bench can have 2 students. Now, in the middle of the year, through midterm admissions, we have some more students who join the school, and this is now the population of the classroom. So you see that the resources like benches, tables all remain the same. The area remains the same, but the number of students suddenly increases. So what happens? So in this case, there are some students who have to share the same bench with 2 other people. So at some places in the class, there are 3 people sitting in one bench. So you see that the resources have got limited, right? So the resources that were initially enough and sufficient for all the students are now constrained or limited for the number of students present at the moment. So a similar thing happens in the case of any country or nation. The government makes sure that each citizen is provided with enough resources. But if suddenly the number of citizens increase, or due to migration the population increases, then the resources gets limited. So the government faces a tough situation in providing everyone with the same amount of resources, right? So we can easily say that the resources limit as there is increase in the population density. So we have seen that potential migrants go out of the country of origin to acquire skills and knowledge, and they work there in order to have a good opportunity of job prospect, right? They develop their career and they also send back huge amount of money back to their homeland. Some also come back to their home country, impart the same knowledge to other people or aspirants who want to go out, and the continuation of this cycle helps in the overall economic growth of the home country. So here we can trace some positive impact of migration from the side of sending countries, right? So the countries who are sending its people out. So for them, these are the positive impact of migration. And what are these? Firstly, if people migrate out of these countries, the reduction in population density helps in reducing the pressure on resources. So now if initially the government was facing problem in providing everyone with enough resources due to emigration of people or movement of people outside these sending countries, the pressure on the resources have decreased. Now secondly, migrants send back money to their country of origin, helping in boosting its economy. So as we just saw in the video earlier, that the migrants, the potential migrants who move out of the country of origin, they send back enough money to their home country, which helps in boosting the economy. Thirdly, some migrants also return to the home country to impart the same knowledge and skills acquired outside. Now this helps in the intellectual growth of the population or the aspirants who want to go out, and it also helps in the overall development of the nation. And finally, migration also reduces birth rates. Now you may ask, why so? This is because most of the migrants are young adults who are going out in search of better job opportunities or to pursue higher education, right? So when the young population is going out of the country, this reduces the birth rate, right? So these are the positive impacts of migration from the side of sending country. Now let us see another example. So Rajesh is a potential able worker and he has gone for a job in company A. Now company A spends enough time on training this person and imparts the necessary skills to make him a professional field engineer, right? Now after some time in the same area, company B offers some more better job offer. Now, seeing this, Rajesh moves from company A to company B. Now, after him, from company A, another 5 employees on which company A had spent time and resources again comes to company B for job, and here 3 gets through while 2 gets rejected. So, a similar case happens in case of countries. So countries that spend money and resources on its citizens for their education and livelihood, they tend to go out to other countries and impart their skills there. So they contribute not to their home country, but to the country they are going to work or pursue the higher education from. So this situation is known as human capital flight or brain drain, right? So to define brain drain, I might say that brain drain refers to the migration of healthy personnel. So for instance, citizens on whom the country has spent enough resources and time on their education and livelihood are now healthy personnel or are independent individuals who are ready to work and contribute to any country's economic growth, or overall growth rather. So now if these healthy personnel migrate to another country in search of better standard of living, higher salaries, access to advanced technology, and more stable political conditions in different places, then this situation may be termed as human capital flight or brain drain. Now we'll be learning about brain drain in details as we proceed in our next lesson. However, this was a brief understanding of brain drain here. Now, to cite an example or to make it more clear, I might say that the global demand for health professionals and doctors all across the world derives Indian doctors to more developed nations like Canada and Australia, and also UK and United States of America. And this happens despite acute domestic shortage of health professionals in our own country, right? So able doctors, only because they are offered better jobs or higher salaries, they move out of the country to work somewhere else despite acute domestic health professional shortage. So this is known as brain drain, and this is a very unfortunate situation, especially for countries who are sending their people out, right? So for the sending countries, brain drain is a big problem. And the most affected of brain drain are the developing countries like India. Now, if you remember Ravi and his family from our previous lesson, yes, I had told you about his family migrating from India to Australia because his father got a better job opportunity there. But there's something that I missed, and that is his family also includes Ravi's grandparents. Now, grandparents were not at all ready to leave their country, and so Ravi's family had to leave their grandparents back in India. Now, since they are a part of the dependent population, that is, they are aged and they need some care and attention, therefore Ravi's father could not leave them alone, and so he arranged for a caretaker. But unfortunately, everybody cannot afford a caretaker, and this leads to a very unfortunate situation for people who are aged or who are retired and need extra care and attention. So we can say that dependent population are most affected, as most of them are not ready to leave their land of origin, right? So people who are a part of the dependent population, who need continuous attention and care, more of love, they are most affected, as most of them are not ready to leave their country of origin as they have a sentimental attachment to it, and also that some of them are not as healthy to travel to such long distance, and so they have to stay back in their home country. So this counts for a negative impact of migration for the sending countries. So now let us recap, or let us restate all the negative impact of migration in the sending countries. So there is loss of labor, as we saw, especially the skilled ones. So the loss of skilled laborers is a huge loss for any country. And more than that, the time and resources spent on these professionals or on these laborers also goes into waste, as they do not give back what they have taken from the country, right? So the loss of labor, especially skilled ones, slows down the economic growth of the country, right? Secondly, loss of productive population, as I mentioned, that most of the migrants or emigrants are young adults, and so they are a part of the productive population. Now, as they go out, the support of the dependent population limits, or it gets reduced. Finally, emigrants often give up their culture. Unfortunately, this is very true. Emigrants tend to give up their culture in order to make themselves a part of all the people living in the country they have migrated to. So they tend to adopt the culture of the place they have migrated to, right? So all these count for the negative impact of migration for the sending country. So till now we have traced the positive as well as the negative impact of migration for the sending country. So from here we will continue our lesson by understanding the same for the receiving countries. Now, so countries with low population growth rate, for example, Canada, Australia, so these countries have low population growth rate, and they tend to develop their country's resources with the help of immigrant population. Now, what do I mean by saying this? So this only means that these are developed nations with enough resources. However, they have shortage or lack of enough human capital. So there's no one to utilize the resources that they can provide or they have. So for this, they tend to be very, very inviting for people who want to migrate, especially potential and healthy personnel who want to migrate to these countries, and then they tend to utilize their country's resources with the help of these immigrant population. For example, Indian doctors who migrate to these developed nations like Canada and Australia are welcomed, and the visa applications are also granted more quickly and easily. So you see that some countries which have enough resources but not enough human capital, they tend to be very inviting for healthy professionals or healthy personnel and tend to utilize their resources with the help of these immigrant population. So before we proceed with our lesson, could you help me fill in the blanks? So countries with low population growth rate develop their country's resources with the help of emigrants, immigrants, or refugees. Yes, we just understood that these countries tend to utilize their country's resources with the help of immigrants or the immigrant population. Now, in your school programs, you must have participated in different cultural programs, right? They are brightening, happening, and we all thoroughly enjoy it, right? So these cultural programs are mainly to celebrate the diversity in culture, right? So the similar thing happens in the case of immigration. So when people tend to immigrate into a country, they bring in their respective cultures along with them, and this helps in cultural diversification in any country, right? So this helps in the growth of cultural diversity, and people get to know about new culture, and this also sometimes tend to justify the quote of unity in diversity. So here we have a list of some positive impact of migration from the side of receiving countries. So the first point says that it reduces underpopulation. So some developed countries that have enough resources tend to be underpopulated. So because of immigration, or because of migration rather, and so the optimum utilization of resources now becomes possible. Secondly, the gain of labor. So these healthy personnel that come in with enough skills and knowledge are a gain of skilled laborers for the country who are receiving them, right? So these laborers are generally skilled, and this helps in boosting the economy of the country who are receiving these immigrants. Further, immigrants are usually ready to work at a lower wage as compared to the native laborers. Now, since these immigrants have come from far off lands and now they are here for new job opportunities, for better prospects of livelihood, so they are ready to work at a lower age as compared to people who are already living there, or for the native laborers, right? So this proves to be beneficial for the receiving country. Now, it also increases the working population, especially for countries comprising more of the aged group, for example, Japan. So some of us here might not know that Japan comprises more of aged population, which constitute the working population. So the immigration of working population helps in balancing the age group and helps in maintaining the population along with the resources. Finally, we have cultural diversity as an important point here. So with immigration, we also have cultural diversity where there's a mix of different cultures in one land. So these were the positive impact of migration for the countries who are receiving migrants. Now another important point here is that migration leads to overpopulation in urban areas. Now we know that urban areas have more job opportunities, they have more resources, they have better government policies. So people usually tend to migrate to these urban areas from rural areas. So this sometimes leads to the problem of overpopulation. Now this overpopulation in urban areas thereby increases the pollution levels, and also the unhygienic living conditions. So these urban areas that have enough jobs and resources, better government policies, better facilities of education and health, they sometimes face a problem of overpopulation, and this increases pollution level. That becomes very, very dangerous for people living here, right? And it also leads to unhygienic living conditions that again pushes people back to rural areas that are more greener and more spacious. And this generally happens in the case of retired people or people who are aged. So as I just mentioned, that due to overpopulation, the urban areas become very polluted and unhygienic, right? So people tend to migrate to rural areas. So this generally leads to the movement of people from urban to rural areas, and this is most common in people who are retired or people who are aged, right? So now they have lived their working age. So now they want to live the rest of their life peacefully and also live in a very healthy and more greener environment, right? So migration that leads to overpopulation in urban areas also leads to movement of people from urban to rural areas. So here were the negative impact of migration for the receiving countries. Let's recap. So the first point says that it leads to a increased pressure on local resources and particularly of the crowded places like cities or rather urban areas. Now, secondly, availability of cheap migrant labor sometimes curb opportunities for the native job seekers. Now, people migrating into these countries are ready to work at a lower wage. Now, this becomes a problem for the people who are already living there, right? So, this curbs the opportunities for the native job seekers. So this becomes a negative impact of migration for the receiving country. Now the third point says that large amount of money earned by the migrants here are sent back to their homeland. Now people who migrate into these countries, they tend to earn here because they have better job opportunities here, and then they tend to send back a huge amount of money to their homeland. Now this helps in the economic development of the homeland and not of the country from where they are earning, right? So this becomes again a problem for the receiving country. Finally, the cultural clashes are a big problem. So on one hand, where the immigration helps in cultural diversity, sometimes it may also lead to cultural clashes that are very sensitive. So these were the negative impact of migration for the receiving country. So far, we were able to trace the positive as well as negative impact of migration for both receiving and sending countries. So we saw that migration can be both beneficial and non-beneficial for the countries who are receiving migrants or for the countries who are sending migrants, right? But we cannot forget that migration helps us understand that there's more to unite us than to divide us. In other words, presence of people of different races, religions, languages, and cultures together increases the understanding, harmony, and tolerance among different groups that exist across the world, right? So as people are migrating across the world from one continent to another, from one country to another, it is important to check the security, order, and economic stability so that everyone is benefited. In our next lesson, we will be learning about brain drain in details. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock test. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.